Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, the most heat, information, conversation, and consternation. You can find the link right here in the description. Bypass the Apple upcharge. Pay $2.99 per month. You can cancel at any time. Again, it's Off the Floor. Our Discord server is where you get the most from us. The most heat anywhere. Also, check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network. Legal again in the state of Florida, and they've added more features back to it. Use Prize Picks. The code is FIVE. You put down $5, you get $50 to play right away. PrizePicks.com, the official fantasy partner of the Five Reasons Sports Network. Again, you put down $5, you get the 10-1 match, $50 to play on any sport up to 6 players together and try to win money. So Prize Picks, use the code FIVE. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yeah, five on the floor, ride for my dogs, where here's the thing, you can check the score, hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frauds, down to Biscayne. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat, we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at Five Reasons Sports. Get Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. The Miami Heat are going to Philadelphia. They're going to Philadelphia with the 3-game winning streak, trying to get out of the 10 spot in the Eastern Conference. Didn't get much help from the Lakers. Josh Giddey with a half-court shot at the buzzer. And so Chicago remains ahead of Miami. Miami did close the gap a little bit on Atlanta. Orlando still in the mix there as well. So we've talked on the last podcast. I had Gio and Major on. Talked about which of those teams would pose the biggest problems to the Heat. They sort of said it was Orlando. I think it might actually be Chicago, the way that they're playing lately, the way that Kobe White and Giddey are playing. But either way, Miami needs to keep winning if they're going to try to get out of the 10. Now, we know that there are some fans who don't want them to. They want them to keep their pick this year and essentially not make the playoffs at all. But one development here that we're going to talk about is that Tyler Herro seems to have his game back. He's just had his best 3-game stretch since the All-Star break. He had one earlier that was not bad, but then he kind of fell off. Efficiency-wise, in particular, from 3, that's come back in a big way over the past 3 games. I thought he played one of his better controlled games of the season against Golden State. It didn't get a lot of attention because everybody was talking about Jimmy. But I thought Tyler was really good in the way that he didn't force anything. Then last night, Alex, I thought that there was a little bit of a step forward with it. We got into it some on the post-game pod, but want to get your view on this. I saw Tyler do some things that I haven't seen him do a lot. One was there was a cut baseline. I think Kyle Anderson found him with a pass, and that was an easy bucket. And we don't see Tyler move off the ball like that a whole bunch. But also his explosion off the catch to drive, make plays, try to get to the line. We've seen more of that lately as well. So we're going to talk about Tyler and kind of what is the next step in the evolution here because, look, they had Wiggins. Wiggins, by the way, not going to play in Philadelphia, doesn't appear, didn't make the trip with the team. He could join them later in the trip, but he had a 30-point game. He had a 42-point game. He won't be available against Philadelphia. Now, Maxey may not be available for the Sixers either, so they're shorthanded, and they're in tanking mode right now. But even with Wiggins around, Tyler is their primary scorer. It's been pretty clear all season that's the direction they want to lean. What have you seen that's different on his part lately, and how much of this is just who's playing with him?
I think it's there's a couple of things here. Like you talk about who's playing with him definitely matters because that's kind of the whole reason we're here. It's almost forced even more growth in what's already been a career season for him. Obviously, his first year making an all-star team and all that. You're seeing even more growth despite all that, right? Like we'd already seen somewhat of a leap from him. And of course, like so much of that came from the 3-point shot volume and bringing that up. And I think this is a direct result of that. I think teams have noted that like he is the primary scorer. He is the guy that we got to, focus on with the scouting report. And I think teams are knowing that the way to kind of at least stymie him a little bit is take away the three from him. I think they're running him off the line when he's on the ball, and off the ball they're denying him the ball. Sometimes they're they're denying him in a way where the defender can't even see anything else on the court. That's how worried they are about him. They're it's basically 4-on-4 at that point. And you can have a guy like Dyson Daniels out of the play if you want to use him as a decoy. But mostly, like the way that he was scoring last night was, there was a lot of off-ball stuff, like you mentioned with the cuts, playing off the catch. You saw a little bit of all the different ways he can score, and not all of it was him creating it for himself. And of course, those were mixed in there. But most of the shots that he ended up making were twos. He did still make 4 threes, but 6 3-point attempts is not necessarily like that's below his averages. He's taking about 9 for the season. So the threes, even though he 4 made threes is nice, that's not necessarily what stood out from the game. I thought the way that he got to the line 7 times, I believe went 9 for 11 from 2. Like the fact that he has become more reliable inside the arc, I think, in my opinion, as a direct result to the changes he's made to his game and the shot profile. I think because teams are afraid of that shot and they're trying to run him off the line so hard on and off the ball, trying to deny him, getting any sort of looks from 3, that he's getting, slightly easier runways to get the shots that he likes from 2, those in-between shots, the floaters that he's gotten so good at. We know that he can hit the mid-range shots. Even last night, though, he, according to pivotfade.com, I want to give them a shout out because that's a great website that I've been relying on recently. Tyler in the half court, all of those shots that he made from 2, only one of them was in the mid range, and out of all the shots he made, only one of them was in the fast break. And what I'm saying is, like, he kind of played out of his comfort zone a little bit. He showed you that he can give you value from 2 when teams are trying to take away the 3 from him, and that's bringing up easy opportunities for him and for his teammates. And he mentioned it, like him and Spo both talked about it after the game. The back cuts, the fact that they can use him as a screener since they're so worried about him and guys don't want to help off of him. Like that's kind of like, the Curry stuff that we talk about. And of course, he's nowhere near Steph Curry's level, so I'm not trying to do that. But it's like when you're that much of a shooting threat, those are the things that you can leverage. Like those are the things that you can add to the menu there.
He said something the other night, maybe it was after the Golden State game. He said he didn't like his shot profile over the past month. I don't know that anybody followed up on it with him because I wasn't in the room when he was asked. Do you know what he meant? Did he mean he wasn't, that he'd gone back to more of a mid-range diet? Because we've talked about it. I don't think he had. So what was he referencing there? Is it him trying to make plays with the ball and maybe the length of shots, difficulty of shots that he was taking? It feels to me like that's been more of the issue lately than his 3-2 distribution.
Honestly, I think you make a good point. But I do think I don't know. Are you hearing me? How about now? I'm not hearing you now. I think you're muted. I'll cut this out later.
Got this out. It was about 8:50.
Yeah, luckily with this website now I can do that again, so it's good.
Yeah, you well, first you're a little shaky with video, and then it just went out. So that's that. Well, you came back and then you went out. So yeah, I set you up. So you can just go from there. I'll hit mute.
I lost my train of thought. What was the question again? Oh, the
I was
twos
talking about
versus
him
threes.
having an issue with his own shot distribution. Yeah.
Okay. All right. 3, 2, 1. I think you bring up a good point, but I do think he was probably referring to the twos versus threes and sometimes getting back into, the mid-range habits. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing like we talk about, like twos, especially with the touch that he has, kind of like the short paint area, like those are not bad shots, because most of the times like he's taking it because he's gotten the guy behind him, he has the guy in jail on his back, and coming out of the pick and roll, and that's the shot that's available. And frankly, I feel like he's just more reliable at those sometimes than finishing at the rim. Not that he's a bad finisher at the rim, but I feel like the floater, that in between shot, is more available more often than a comfortable layup at the rim. So I like that he knows like what his strengths are. He knows that he can take the mid-range shots every now and then, but doesn't need to. And finding that balance can be tough when they're trying so hard to keep you away from doing the thing that essentially helped propel you to your first All-Star season. So I think he's trying to get back to that level of like, okay, I want to get up a double-digit amount of threes every night or something close to it. And I think it's probably frustrating for him when it feels like teams are taking him out of his game, but he's doing a good job responding. Like the counters are obviously there. Last night wasn't his best passing game, but that's obviously been something that, he's grown in all season on the ball. But last night wasn't about his on the ball scoring. It was about the way he was able to come off the catch and do things, kind of manipulate aggressive defenders and essentially get them to panic and make mistakes. And I think essentially most of the times that he scored, it was because he was able to find a way through his movement to kind of get Dyson Daniels off him. He ends up scoring over just about everybody else. I think, shout out John Blanco pointed out, he scored on Dyson Daniels twice. So you're talking about, he's finding different ways to free himself up and take advantage of other people when those opportunities come. And I think he's playing just, a much more polished version of his game and just reading and reacting to what the defense is throwing at him.
Well, I think as we look forward, and we don't know that they're going to get out of the play-in. Nobody does. I know, again, there are a lot of Heat fans who don't want them to. If they do, though, and they see, say, Cleveland, he's going to see some of DeAndre Hunter on him. I don't think there's really a chance for them to see Boston at this stage. Again, they'd have to get to the 8 and then win an 8-7 game on the road and then get Boston in the first round. But, I mean, Cleveland, obviously, with their guards with Mitchell and Garland, Mitchell's not a great defender, so they probably would throw Hunter on him. He's had some games against Cleveland in the past that have been pretty good. So, again, it's just something to look forward to. If he can continue this, and we've talked about him kind of having to continually evolve, like as teams are guarding him differently, as the Heat have less around him, at least in terms of Jimmy and the distraction that he provided on the court, where teams had to worry about him defensively, more and more of this has fallen on Tyler. But on the other side of this, I want to get into who he's playing with, because I do think that has made some difference here. And I also think it's instructive as the Heat decide what they're going to do in the future. And what kind of players they might put around Tyler if Tyler's still here. So that's always the caveat that we put in there. Before we do, though, we want to talk to you about Cousins Moving. And now it's time for Who's on the Move, sponsored by our friends over at Cousins USA Moving and Storage, family owned and operated since 1996. They can service both residential and commercial moves, whether you're going across town, across the state, across country, and even across the globe. They have a 15,000 square foot private warehouse in Lauderhill, Broward County. The number one priority for Cousins Moving is transparency and being honest with their customers. They have a very low turnover, with most of their movers working for them for over 10 years. So find them online at Cousins Moving on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or visit the website at www.cousinsusa.com/5RSN. They've got an exclusive offer through 5RSN. You get 5 free wardrobe boxes with your next move, so there's no need to pack your clothes away in suitcases. Just mention 5 reasons. And now, who's on the move? All right, this is where our guy Sean Rochester gets upset at me because I focus on the point guard position. But I do think we should touch on who's been out there with him in the starting lineup, and then also how that might look in the future. So of late, he hasn't had Duncan Robinson with him. They've had Alec Burks with him. And then they've had Wiggins, but Wiggins is not going to play in the first game of this trip. I don't know who goes in the starting lineup. It could be Hawkins. It could be one of these things where Spoelstra puts the guy who hasn't been playing in the starting lineup and just limits his minutes if he's not playing well. And Sean and I did an episode before the Atlanta game about Hawkins and Rozier not playing at all recently, and that it seems like Spoelstra is tightening the rotation. But again, as players are out, he may change that. It does not appear Duncan's going to play in this first game either. Before we get into Davion Mitchell and Kyle Anderson and sort of how that's worked with Herro as he's run with the bench unit, which he did a lot in the Atlanta game, Is there any discernible difference between the way that Tyler plays when he's playing with Burks as opposed to Duncan?
Well, I guess the difference would just be that Duncan is more, his role is not just as a shooter, receiving, passes to the corner and all that. Like Duncan is used very much in a playmaking kind of way, as we've talked about for so long now, and the way that his role has evolved over the past couple of seasons, where he's constantly in actions with Bam and is one who finds guys out of those actions, right? Like it's another guy who people are constantly trying to run off the line, ends up, sometimes taking floaters just like Tyler, and is another guy who, like I said, can find other guys. So I think here Duncan is much more of a playmaker for them, despite, Alec Burks being more of a quote unquote hooper, right? Like if you just played them one-on-one, maybe I would give the nod to Alec Burks. But yeah, that's why I think it's funny that like Duncan is the playmaker, and it's for good reason. I'm not trying to shade. Like I've definitely been a proponent of as much Duncan and Bam action as possible for this team, because there's just not that many offensive options. But I think Duncan is another guy who, like, there are sets being run to take advantage of him, and I feel like Burks is more on the receiving end a lot of times. So that's where I think there's like a little bit more of a shared responsibility there. Whereas with Burks, it's really Tyler's like group. With,
Okay,
of course,
and with
Bam
Wiggins,
being a hub as well.
right? And with Wiggins,
And
we've seen them put the ball in Wiggins' hands some also. We've
Mhm.
talked about him needing to title his handle a little bit, but they have run offense through him, particularly in fourth quarters. And Spoelstra mentioned yesterday, as we record this on Friday night, that he didn't run anything for Tyler towards the end of the game. He just sort of let him play, and that gets into this other piece of
He
it,
actually said he didn't
which
run
is
anything for him the whole game.
the whole game, right? And so this gets to this other piece of it, though, which is that they've been using this bench group of Highsmith, Davion Mitchell, and Kyle Anderson, and they've been putting Tyler out there with them. They did it in the Atlanta game. Now, essentially, Kyle Anderson is the Jovic stand-in right now, but I'm not convinced, and I said this in the postgame show last night, that Nico's going to go right back to his old role. I think Spoelstra's found something here with Kyle Anderson where he just trusts him.
Oh,
I know that Nico's upside is higher. He was contributing as a playmaker. It seemed like he'd found his fit before he got hurt. But I would expect, even though it's not that kind of injury, obviously it's not a leg injury, that kind of thing. So I don't know that the minutes restriction is going to be significant at the very start, but I do think he's going to find minutes for Kyle Anderson. Why, though? I mean, Davion Mitchell's not a traditional point guard, but he has shown the ability to lower his shoulder, get in the paint, and do some things from a playmaking standpoint that I don't think that we necessarily knew of when they got him. Kyle Anderson is a Boris Diaw type. Both played in San Antonio, but kind of a front court player who's a little bit slow. Call him slow mo, but you can run offense from him as kind of a hub, a wheel. Do some of those things, and again, you don't have the upside that you have with Jovic, but you might have a little bit more certainty about what you're getting. Is that the kind of lineup that will allow Tyler to keep flourishing off the ball if he's playing with that group? Is there enough? Because I look in the future and I say, if they can get a playmaking guard to play with Tyler, that would be ideal. Playmaking guard with some length who can guard, that would be perfect. They don't really have that right now. Davion's 6 feet tall, but at least to have Mitchell and Anderson out there, is that one of the reasons Tyler's been more effective off the
for
ball?
sure. I think in general, I've definitely been a proponent of, like, you acquired 3 good defenders, of course, to different levels and different roles, but I think play them. They're all pretty good, and I think they've all been pretty good. Like, I haven't really been disappointed with any of them. The only thing has been, of course, Wiggins' availability. But when he's been on the floor, I feel like he's been mostly useful, has been a pleasant surprise. And I'm sorry, I wasn't even trying to talk about Wiggins in general, because I just wanted to point out that's like been the one thing when you look at all 3 guys. But otherwise, like, Mitchell has been super solid. Kyle Anderson has been super solid when he's played. And like, those guys know what their strengths are. They know how to play a team game. They know how to bolster a team that needed, that infusion of defense around the time that they made the trade. They've been an inconsistent defense all season. And, I just think in general, those guys strengthen you there on that end of the floor. And then on offense, like you mentioned, those guys can both play the point guard position. Like, Anderson is somebody who grew up, who came up as a point guard, as a big point guard, but a point guard nonetheless. And Davion kind of has like that running back build and almost has a running back game, like the way that he gets to the paint, lowers his shoulder, like you mentioned, and he's pretty speedy. He mentioned last night that he feels like he can get into the paint anytime he wants, and that's why he feels that teams leave him open from three. And so, I think he's also a willing passer, a decent passer. So between those two guys, like playing them both together, they can both take on those ball handling duties, and you can have Tyler run around off ball all day long. And I think it just makes it easier for them. Now, I'm not saying you play that lineup, 35 minutes out of the game, 40 minutes out of the game, but those guys should be playing a lot. Now, I just disagree on the Jovic thing because I do think he had really found a stride there before he got hurt. But I wouldn't be surprised if Spo, just didn't play him that often because of the injury situation where, he's, slowly working him back in and maybe he starts playing more towards the end. But if you're just telling me a healthy Jovic, I think he's ahead of the rotation, ahead of Kyle Anderson in the rotation. But I think Anderson, the way that he's looking right now, it looks like he would probably, in my opinion, take the 9th spot, kind of like what Larson was doing last night, the guy who kind of plugs the gaps and plays a few minutes. Maybe he'll play a little bit more because I just think he's more reliable. For as much as I like Larson and as much as we saw from Jaquez last season, that's what kind of Spo is doing right now. He's locking into the guys who can play a role the best and have just been reliable at what they do. And for as much as Pella has shown at times, the shooting is still, not on the level you want it to be. He still fouls a lot. We've seen the inconsistencies behind me. So I feel like he's playing his tighter rotation with vets right now, and Kyle Anderson definitely factors in there. And I think he makes a lot of sense, man. He's a really nice connector. I think you got to play him a little bit more on ball when you do play him, though, because he's not really a positive as a spacer. He can make a wide open three. It's just going to take him a long time to get the shot up. That's the problem. But as a passer and as somebody who can take shots in the paint over smaller dudes, I trust him there, and he makes smart plays. He doesn't try to do too much. So yeah, I think those guys should factor into the rotation for sure.
Yeah, they have a bunch of guys who take some time to get off their three-point shot, but Slow-Mo is probably the slowest in that regard. I'm with you that it looks like an 8.5-man rotation going forward. I think that's the way it's going to be. I think he goes in with a
9 with Kyle if Jovic is healthy.
And right, that's what I mean, though. But an idea of who's going to play the 9th, but the 9th might not play both halves. I feel like that's kind of where it's at. He give a few minutes and try to layer it together. And of course, guys are going to miss time with this team. Guys always miss time. I think Burks has made a case for minutes too. I think that there could be certain games where you could plug him in as the 9th. It's just amazing to me how much further down the rotation Rozier and Jaquez have got. And I say that even as I think Jaquez could start in place of Wiggins in Philadelphia. And he might score because, again, Philadelphia is such a mess right now. But I just look at those two guys who are supposed to be the 4th and 5th scorers on this team. And we're talking about 9th guys, and I've got 3 guys ahead of them for the 9th spot, which is really – you look at the consistency they've got. And we talk about Tyler. One of the amazing things about this season for me is that he was playing with a guy who was giving them nothing in the backcourt. And Terry Rozier, and he's still producing. And he continues to produce even as the circumstances change around him. No question the decision-making needs to get better at times, but I think the decisions have been good over the past week. So if he continues that, I think what you want to see with Tyler now, regardless of how the season ends, just finish strong. Finish strong. Give people a good taste in their mouth about your overall year, because I do think there was about 3 to 4 weeks there where he didn't look like he did before the All-Star break. All right, that's it for today. We'll have more tomorrow. Again, the Heat are in Philadelphia. A couple of road games coming up here. Chance to push the winning streak to 5, and then we'll see what happens after that. But again, watching Chicago, Atlanta, Orlando, and of course the lottery standings as well. I'll have an episode with Adele coming up about who's made a name for themselves in the NCAA tournament and who to watch in the Final Four when it actually gets to that. All right, for Alex, I'm Ethan. Check out cousinsusa.com/5RSN and Prize Picks. Use the code FIVE.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.